To find the right answers in IELTS reading or IELTS listening, what you need to do is find the answer options that say the same thing as the text or the audio. The problem is, they're not going to say the same thing in the exact same words. They're going to use synonyms. And in this video, I'm going to teach you how to use synonyms or how to understand them to boost your score. I'm sure you know what a synonym is already. A word like big has a synonym like large, or a word like clean has a synonym like tidy. But did you know that they underpin the IELTS reading and IELTS listening tests? That's really what it's all about. Take a look at this question. Imagine you're doing this IELTS reading question and you see the exact same words used in the question and the text. For example, the question prompt says, what is the biggest risk of traveling to Mars? Answer option B, which is correct, says receiving too much particle radiation from the sun. And then in the text itself, it says the biggest risk of traveling to Mars is receiving too much particle radiation from the sun. Well, this really wouldn't test your reading skills at all because it's using the exact same words. There are no synonyms here. So that is not what happens in IELTS reading. Let's take a look at a listening question. Imagine you're doing an IELTS listening test and question 1 says, what should the man buy for his camping trip? Answer option C says, a waterproof tent. And you can see there in the transcript, it says, it's going to rain this weekend, so I think you should buy a waterproof tent. You can see that a lot of the words are exactly the same. There are no synonyms. This is not a good test of your listening ability, and this is not what IELTS do in the reading or the listening test. You will never see the same word or words or phrases used in the question and the answer options or in the passage and the audio. They're always going to be synonymous. They're going to be synonyms. Now, there are different types of synonyms. Let's take a look. So we have adjectives, nouns, verbs, phrasal verbs, adverbs, phrases, antonyms, and word forms. That's what we're going to go through in this video in some detail. I do suggest that you stick around to the end. Now, if you want to do some practice questions even before we begin to look at this stuff, you can click the link in the description below. We have 3 bonus questions that will test your ability to identify synonymous language or synonyms. And if you want even more practice, then you can check out E2 Test Prep for lots of IELTS reading and listening questions. So getting an understanding of all those different types of synonyms is going to prepare us well for test day. Let's start with adjective synonyms. So here we are looking at adjectives. We have one adjective on the left and we have its synonym, another adjective that means the same thing or something very similar on the right, like big and large, little and small, fast and quick, smart and clever, broad and wide, skinny and slim, dangerous and risky, hard and difficult, usual and normal, fat and obese. So with adjective synonyms, you may have noticed that it has a very similar meaning, but it might differ in terms of degree. For example, you can describe a coffee cup as big, large, or gigantic. The meaning is the same, but it just differs in degree, or here with size. And here we have chubby, fat, and obese. There's something very similar about the meanings of these words, except they differ in their degree. Now, synonyms are interesting because they might not have the exact same meaning. They might slightly differ, and they will differ depending on the context they're used in. For example, if you think about the differences between clever, smart, and intelligent, which are all synonymous, they're synonyms, they all mean roughly the same thing, but if you had to choose one for yourself, I don't know about you, but I'd want to be intelligent rather than clever because Clever has a slightly different meaning, and to me, intelligent kind of seems, I don't know, a bit better. So now let's put these adjective synonyms into the context of IELTS reading or listening. So here on the left-hand side, imagine that you see an adjective like big or little or fast in the question or in the answer options. Now, of course, in the reading passage or the listening audio, it's not going to use the exact same word. It's going to use a synonym. So instead of big, you'll hear or see large. Instead of little, you'll see or hear small. Fast, quick, smart, clever, broad, wide, etc. These are how synonyms are used in the questions and answer options and in the reading passages and listening audios. Let me give you an even more practical example. So imagine that the question you're looking at or the answer option you're looking at says, the hiking trail is dangerous and hard for beginners. Now, in the reading passage, it's not going to say the exact same thing, or in the listening audio, it of course will not say the exact same thing. It'll use synonymous language like, the hiking trail is risky and can be difficult for people who have never hiked before. So here you can see the adjective dangerous and the synonym risky. You can see the adjective hard and the synonym difficult. You can also see something more interesting here, which is beginners and people who have never hiked before, but we'll get to that later on in the video. Let's look at another type of synonym. So we looked at adjectives and now we're looking at noun synonyms. This is where we have one noun like student and we have its synonym like pupil or problem and issue, area and region, business, company, exam, test, place, location, equity, fairness, trouble, danger, car, vehicle, reason, and cause. So if you look in the thesaurus and you see any noun, you'll probably see a list of synonyms as well as adjectives, etc. So most words, if not all, have synonyms, similar meaning words. One of the questions you might ask is, why does English have so many synonyms? The reason is English is a mix of lots of different languages. For example, take the noun dog. This is from Old English, while canine is from Latin, hound is from German, and puppy is actually of French origin. English is a mix of lots of languages, and that's one of the reasons why we have so many synonyms. So we use these words in different contexts, like we use the word dog differently to the way we use canine or hound or even puppy. Let's look more closely at it in the context of IELTS reading and listening. So with the nouns, imagine in the question or the answer options you see the word student. Now they're probably not going to use the exact same word in the reading passage or listening audio. They'll use the word pupil. Same as area and region, or problem and issue and business and company. So that's how noun synonyms work, and that's probably what's going to happen on test day. You're going to see a noun here in the question, but you're going to see a different noun that has the same meaning, a synonym, in the passage or the listening audio. Okay, let's look at the next ones. Verb synonyms. So here we have a list of verbs like have, make, know, want, find, ask, feel, buy, begin, and give. And we have their synonyms: own, build, understand, desire, locate, inquire, experience, purchase, start, and provide. Feel free to pause the video, take a close look at this, and understand how the meaning is identical or at least very similar. And if we put this in the context of an IELTS reading or listening question, on the left-hand side, you might see these verbs appear in the question or answer options. And then in the reading passage or listening audio, you're going to have the synonym. So have and own, make, build, know, understand, want, desire, find, locate, ask, inquire, etc. But I haven't finished with verbs yet, because in English, we also have these funny, interesting verbs called phrasal verbs. That's where you have the main verb like get, and then you have a preposition like off, or take, the main verb, up, etc. Let's take a look at those. So, for example, you can do a phrasal verb to verb synonym. That is, ask out means the same thing as invite. Or check in means the same thing as register. Fall apart, break. Take off, leave. Get up, stand. Give in, surrender. Go over, review. Try out, test. Work out, calculate. Run away, escape. There are lots of phrasal verbs in English. So you're much more likely to hear a phrasal verb in the listening part of the test, because we usually use them in conversation, less formal conversation. That is, you probably won't see phrasal verbs in the reading section. So let's take a look at this. So in the question and answer options in the written page, you might see the single verb like invite or register or break. But in the audio itself that you hear, you'll hear the phrasal verb ask out, check in, or fall apart. They're used much more in spoken English. Okay, so we've looked at adjectives, we've looked at nouns, we've looked at verbs, and we've looked at phrasal verbs. Let's look at adverbs, because they can be pretty tricky. So here are a list of adverb synonyms. Sometimes means the same thing or something very similar to occasionally. Actually, really, almost, nearly, probably, most likely, especially, mainly, normally, usually, constantly, always, immediately, instantly, rarely, seldom, quickly, speedily. So again, if we put this in the context of an IELTS reading or an IELTS listening question, in the question or answer options, you might see the word sometimes or actually or almost or probably. But then in the reading passage or the listening audio, these adverbs will appear, the synonyms, occasionally, really, nearly, or most likely. Feel free to pause the video and take a closer look at this list. So far we've looked at all single words, how you can change a noun to a noun or an adjective to an adjective, etc. Let's take a look at something a little bit more complex now, and this is how a phrase can have a synonymous phrase. That is, the phrases will have different words but mean the same thing. For example, imagine in the IELTS reading or listening question or in the answer options, you have the phrase watch out for. But in the reading passage or the listening audio, it says, be cautious of. These are synonyms. They're synonymous. They mean the same thing, but they use completely different words. Or not sure of, don't know. Make up your mind, decide. Keep in mind, remember, once in a while, sometimes. Take it easy, relax, come across, find. Get into an accident, crash, keep an eye on, watch, take care of, look after, take a shot at, try or attempt. And just to be a little bit clearer here, imagine in the question or the answer option, you read this sentence, visitors need to watch out for lions. But in the reading passage or the listening audio, it says tourists need to be cautious of the lions. You can see here that these sentences actually say the same thing using completely different words. Or most young people are not sure of what they want to do when they're older. Teenagers mostly don't know what careers they want when they grow up. You need to make up your mind prior to your test. It's best if you decide what to do before your test. Speaking of your test, if you do need to prepare properly, you should come along and join our live classes on E2 Test Prep. These live classes happen twice a day, every day, and they are taught by expert teachers who teach you the exact same methods that I'm teaching you now, except there are more of them, and we'll go into depth in them, and you can actually do practice as you go, and they're pretty fun. Just when you thought you'd understood everything there is to know about synonyms, I have one more for you. It's an antonym. Do you know what an antonym is? An antonym is simply an opposite word. So if I say to you, what's the opposite of sad? What's the opposite of sad? You say happy, right? But what if I make the word unhappy? Then I have a synonym for sad. I have sad and unhappy, which mean the same thing. But I've used an antonym, but put a prefix on the front, and un. Let's take a closer look. So we have the main word sad. We have the opposite meaning, or the antonym, happy. But the synonym can be made by saying unhappy. Sad and unhappy are now synonymous. Or I have the main word wrong. I have its opposite meaning, accurate, but I can make a synonym for wrong by saying inaccurate. Inaccurate and wrong mean the same thing. They're synonymous. Can you see how we're doing this? Or I have the main word cheap, have the opposite meaning, which is expensive, but I can make a synonym for cheap by saying inexpensive. So they were adjectives, and that's how we make a synonym out of an antonym using a prefix like un or in, etc. Let's take a close look at some verbs now, because we can do the same thing here. So we have the main word or the main verb, deny. And we have the opposite meaning, which is approve. But I can make a synonym for deny by saying disapprove. I have the main verb oppose. And I have its opposite meaning, agree. But I can make a synonym for oppose by saying disagree. So oppose and disagree mean the same thing. Or I can take the word deter and find its opposite meaning, which is to encourage. But then I can make a synonym by saying discourage. So deter and discourage mean the same thing. So this can get a little bit tricky, especially in the listening test, because you might think that you hear the word happy when in fact you've heard the word unhappy. They've said unhappy, so you need to be very careful. You need to be aware of these antonyms and synonyms, etc. Okay, let's recap what we've learned so far. So we've looked at adjectives, nouns, verbs, phrasal verbs, adverbs, phrases, and antonyms. So there's actually one more thing you need to be aware of. And this time it's not about synonyms. It's about using the same word, but changing the word form. For example, in the question, you might have the word success, right? But then in the passage, it might say successful or successfully. So it's actually the same word, but a different form. You need to be aware of this. So take a look at this little table here. You have the noun success. You have the verb succeed. You have the adjective successful and the adverb successfully. Or protection, protect, and protective. Comfort, comfort is actually the same in the noun or the verb form. Comfortable and comfortably. For example, in the question or the answer options, you'll see the word successful, like Sally was successful in her second Olympic Games when she won gold. But then in the reading passage or the listening audio, it won't have the same word form, successful. It might say success, as in Sally's second Olympic Games were a success where she took home first place. And while we're here, can you see the phrase she won gold? Can you see the synonymous phrase in the reading passage or listening audio? Aha, she took home first place. So we have a different way here of seeing synonymous language. Okay, I think I've now introduced you to everything there is to know about synonymous language and synonyms, which is really important to understand for IELTS reading and listening. It's now time to do a little bit of guided practice with me, so do stick around. This will help. Take a look at this question prompt here. Before we attempt to answer the question, pay attention to the phrase biggest risk in the question prompt. What I want you to do is find the synonymous phrase or the synonymous language, a phrase that means the same thing but uses different words in the passage. It won't use the same words, but it'll use words that have a very similar meaning. I'll give you 10 seconds. Go. So, what's the synonymous phrase? There it is there, most perilous. So, we found this synonymous phrases, one in the question and one in the text, so we now know where to read. Let's take a closer look at the answer options now, and I'm going to kind of help you a bit. So, read the question again. What is the biggest risk of a voyage to Mars? I'm going to help you and just tell you that the answer option is B, receiving too much radiation from the sun. So now let's match these two parts to the text and look at the synonymous language. What makes traveling to Mars most perilous is being subjected to excessive radiation caused by the sun's fast-moving particles. Notice the synonyms here. Most perilous, biggest risk. Traveling to Mars, a voyage to Mars. You can see traveling and voyage mean the same thing. Subjected to, receiving. Excessive radiation, too much radiation. Caused by the sun, from the sun. Cool, so you can really start to see here how these questions are actually constructed. They're really based on synonymous language or synonyms. Let's take a look at another reading example. So imagine you're doing a matching question and the correct answer option says, people should have equal opportunities. And the text will not say the exact same words. Of course not. It's going to use synonyms. It might say something like, the same possibilities should be open to everyone. Just take a look at this for a second. Can you see the synonyms here? If we look closely, we can see that it's kind of been reversed as well. So people at the start of the correct answer option comes as the final word in the text there, everyone, people, everyone. Then we have, should be open to, and equal opportunities means the same thing as the same possibilities. Imagine you're doing this question here. Why do drug researchers find insects interesting? And the correct answer option is because of the range of substance insects have developed to protect themselves. And the passage says, which has led to the evolution of a wide variety of very effective compounds for their own defense and offense. You can see here, range of substances is synonymous with wide variety of very effective compounds. Insects has actually used a pronoun there. That's synonymous there, so insects and there. And have a look at this one. This is a really interesting paraphrase or use of synonyms. Protect themselves means the same thing as defense and offense. This time, imagine you're doing a true, false, not given question, and the statement says, one study looked at by de Villiers had expected to show that ingesting plastic caused salmon harm. The text says, surprisingly, de Villiers said, only one well-designed research project failed to find the effect it was looking for, had expected to show. You can see the connection there. Salmon that incidentally consumed microscopic bits of plastic, ingesting plastic caused salmon. And finally, the word harm here, right down the bottom, it says there was no noticeable effect. So this one's a little bit more complicated, but you can still see the synonymous ideas and the synonyms used to express the synonymous ideas, or the same ideas used, but using different language. Okay, so we've looked at these synonyms and this synonymous language and these synonymous ideas in the reading section. Let's now turn our attention to the listening section and do a question. Okay, so let's read the question. It says, where does the man plan to go camping? Near a river, in a forest, or on top of a hill? Okay, so listen carefully, see if you can find the right answer, and then after this, we're going to deep dive and I'll show you the synonymous language, the synonyms. Listen carefully.
So where are you going to go camping this weekend?
Well, we had planned to camp on the edge of the snowy river, but it's flooded this time of year. so we'll avoid that.
Fair enough.
Apparently, the weather is going to be very clear, so we want to camp somewhere up high so we can get a good view of the night sky and see the stars.
Oh, lovely. In that case, you won't want to be surrounded by trees.
No, that would ruin the view.
All right, how did you go with that one? Did you get it right? Let's now look at all the synonyms used. So the question said plan to go camping, and the audio said going to go camping. Answer option A said near a river. The synonymous language was on the edge of the snowy river. Answer option B said in a forest. The audio said surrounded by trees. You can see the word in and surrounded by are synonymous, and forest and trees, of course. Answer option C was very interesting. It said on top of a hill, and the audio said somewhere up high, a good view of the night sky. So here, the correct answer option was actually C, on top of a hill, and we kind of had to draw an inference from the audio. It did kind of use synonyms, but we also needed to just work this out for ourselves. Let's take a closer look. So the audio said up high and a good view. We therefore needed to infer from these words on top of a hill. You can kind of see the synonymous language, but sometimes you need to think a little bit more deeply. Cool, so you now have a thorough understanding of how synonyms work in the reading and listening sections of the test, which is super important. If you feel like sharing this video, please do that and make sure you click like and leave a comment. Just remember that you can do some practice questions as well by clicking the link in the description below. And you can always go across to E2 Test Prep for more live classes and practice questions. My name's Jay, see you soon.